I have this question here from Samuel, and Samuel is saying, I listen to your podcast every day on Spotify, and I want to thank you for always giving out impactful wisdom. It has transformed my thinking in ways I couldn't have imagined, and I am grateful for being a part of this community. I recently attended an international event and noticed that people from different cultures have different preferences for how they are addressed. Some people are comfortable being called by their first name, while others prefer more formal titles. How can I navigate these cultural differences and find a way to address everyone respectfully? Now, this is a good question that Samuel is asking. It has to do with interaction and building relationships. And Samuel is saying what he has noticed is that based on cultural influences, some people are more informal with the way they like to be addressed, and some people like to be called, have certain nomenclatures or designations that they want to put before their names. And he's asking how does he navigate his way through addressing people in terms of people with different cultures. How does he address people respectfully? Now, this is a very good question. It's a very interesting question. I think, first of all, you should always address people the way you've been trained. That should be your first call of interaction. That should be your first template of interacting with people. It shouldn't be blending in with their culture first, especially where you are in an environment of mixed people. So you say you went for an international conference and you have so many people of different cultures, different values. I think the first thing we ought to do is have respect for your own parental values. And so address people the way you have been trained, the way your parents have trained you. And this is where parental influence is so important. That's why it's called an upbringing. And so what that means is they are bringing you to a place whereby you are elevated. You are now at a particular level. When you are up at that level, what you need to do is bring with you the values that your parents have installed. So that should always be your default approach to people, how you've been brought up, not based on culture, not based on what everybody is doing. We always should default to what we have been taught, and what we've been taught is very important. And that's why parenting is such an incredible task. It's something that defines the life of a person, how they are accepted or how they are rejected. So it's always how you've been taught to address people that are older than you. So for us here in Nigeria, majorly we are taught to address older people as Mr., Mrs., Sir, Ma, Miss. You understand? That's how we've been taught. I believe that when you are in a place of mixed culture, an internationally diverse environment, the first thing is to bring your culture into it. And so, Sir, Ma, Miss, Mr. John, Mrs. Susan, no, whatever the name is, Mr., Sir, Miss, Mrs., very important. I think that's very important to do when you are unsure. Default to your upbringing, how you've been taught to respect people, how you've been taught to respect people. That's always important. When I traveled to Canada, when I was in Canada, when I was staying in Canada, I when I got there, when I got to school initially, that's how I addressed people. I stayed with a Canadian family, and the way I addressed them was always Mr. This, Mrs. This, even my lecturers, Mr., Mrs., and because that's how I was brought up. That's how I was brought up to address older people. I wasn't brought up to address people by their first name. So immediately I got there, thing I did was to default. I didn't throw away my upbringing because I was in a new environment. The way I showed respect was the way my parents taught me to show respect. So that's always the first. That's always the first engagement. That's always the first way in which we are to interact with people. We should always default to our upbringing. At least at first encounter, what did your parents teach you? Now, as you get to know the person better, and when I talk about knowing better, it doesn't have to be for months or years, but you're interacting with someone. It can be a 5 minute, 10 minute conversation. As you get to know the person better, now you now need to watch out for what the person might ask you to refer to them as. So first of all, you respect your own upbringing. But secondly, you must respect the individual. And so sometimes when you're talking to someone and you say, oh, Mr. This, and person say, no, I'd rather you call me John, Adam, Sam, Adamo, whatever it is, the person is asking that you call them something. Now you must respect that person. And that comes by just interacting with the person. You understand? So that should not be your initial approach. You just say, oh, I'm in an international conference and there are a couple of white people here, and I know that white people love to be called by their first name. Don't just assume. Start with what your parents taught you, and then by talking to the person will tell you, call me by my first name. And then you have to respect the person. You respect the person because the person has told you what they wish you would call them. Very important. Sometimes it takes a while for people to tell you what they want you to call them. Sometimes it's weeks of interaction, months of interaction, and the person will say, call me this. There's some people I've been doing business with, and when I start doing business with people, I always start out with calling them ma, sa. And then they tell me after weeks or months of working with them, call me this. Call me this. It wouldn't be respectful for me to stand on how I've been brought up at this point in time. Because now it shows that I do not have respect for that person, because that person is now telling me I would feel more comfortable with you calling me this. And that means that person is saying, I want to interact with you more, and I'm opening up myself to you. And you need to make me comfortable with interacting with you. And one thing you can do to make me more comfortable is to call me something that makes me feel comfortable. So at that point, you need to call them what it is that they request to be called. Very important. This is at that point in that relationship where you are showing respect for that person. This is what they would like to be called. And I feel the third stage in addressing someone with respect is a much deeper stage that very few relationships ever get to. A lot of relationships stop at people telling them what they want to be called. Most relationships we have are always stop at that level of what you have been trained by your parents to call someone. So a lot of people do not bother to tell you, call me this. A lot of people do not give that much access. You understand? They just take it as this is what you call them, and they respect what you call them. But the person that's going to give you more access will say, if you are going to interact more, call me this. But the third level of interacting with respect is when you respect the relationship. And what I mean by this is it gets to a place whereby you don't call the person or address the person by what you have been trained to address someone or what they ask you to call them. You address them by how you actually see them. So both people in the relationship address each other by how you actually see each other. In fact, there is no official initiation to this nomenclature. It just starts all of a sudden. It's a soul thing. What your soul feels comfortable calling them, because you kind of see them, is what you see them as. And a lot of times this is who they are to you genuinely. It's a reflection of how close you are to them and how close they are to you. And so this is a level that I said, like I said, a lot of people hardly get to this level in their relationships where you call someone what you actually see them as. So I have people that relate with me and they started off by calling me Mr. Tola, Sir Tola, and then I tell some people, call me TA, and they start calling me TA. But some people, it evolves to a point whereby they start calling me daddy, uncle. Some people call me Egbon. Egbon in Yoruba means my older one. You see, some of these things, it's not like I'm totally comfortable with it. Personally, I'm not comfortable with people calling me daddy. I am not comfortable with it. I don't particularly like it. I was having a discussion with my wife and say, I don't like when people calling me daddy, daddy Tola, daddy T. I don't like it. But then my wife told me something, said, this is how they see you. This is how they see you. It's going to be very awkward for you to tell them to unsee you that way. That's how they see you. They see you as their dad. They see you as someone that could be their dad. Some of them have no relationships with their dad. You are the closest thing they have to a father. That's how they see you. So respect them. Just respect them. You understand? Respect how they see you. That is the purest expression of you in their mind. Not TA, not Satola, is daddy, is uncle. So at that point, I need to respect them. That's a pure expression. If someone calls you Egbon, he just sees me as his older one. So I need to, some relationships get to that level where they totally see you in the light that their soul sees you. And for them, that's ultimate respect, how they see you. So they call you what they see you as. And then you can call them what you see them as. My son. Call them son. Call them brother. You understand? Call them, women have a way of reaching this level more than men do in their relationships. Because they are more emotional creatures, or they've been allowed to be more emotional creatures. I believe men are more emotional, just that we've been trained not to be emotional. But women have been allowed to be emotional creatures. And because of that, you see a girl and her girlfriend, and she would call her, hey, my love, how you doing? Because that's how she sees her, as somebody that she loves. My love, my sweetheart, my darling. You understand? That's how they see each other. They get to that point where they respect each other enough to call themselves how their soul calls their friends. Guys are more guarded. So we might feel it in our heart that we love this guy, but we don't say it. You understand? So we kind of defer to other things like bro. Some people will say blood, my blood. It's respect. That's how they respect the other person. That means we are so close. We are like blood brothers. We are blood. My guy. That means something to them. My guy. So you can't just call everybody my guy. Some people see that disrespectful, but some people get to that level of the relationship where that's who the person is. My guy. You understand? And that means a lot to them. So I'm not very particular on what people call me. For instance, sometimes I have people call me different things, and to the outsider, the person might think, oh, this person is disrespecting you. They're disrespecting you. They can't just be calling you that. But then I understand where they're coming from. So that's, I feel that's the dynamics. First of all, when you're unsure, defer back to your upbringing. How were you trained to interact or to address somebody who you are meeting for the first time? Do you understand? Forget about culture. It's not about culture. We have some very, very twisted cultures out there that are embedded in serious, for lack of better word, ridiculous values. You understand? So don't just step into a place and just say, oh, this is the American culture. And you just address everybody as, hey, you guys, you guy, that kind of thing. It would seem disrespectful to some people that you feel that you be told yourself that is their culture. and you realize that they are offended by that and say, you don't refer to us as guys. Do you understand? You don't refer to us as guys. So don't think of the pervading culture when you're starting out interacting with someone. Think of the value that has been embedded in you as a young child by your parents to say this is how you address people. And that's why upbringing is very important. Right upbringing is very important. Because when we don't have the right upbringing, when we find ourselves in those kind of scenarios, we don't know what to do. So what we do is try to blend in, and that's why people make a lot of terrible mistakes. So upbringing. The second thing is that once you start developing a relationship with these people or interacting with them more, sometimes they tell you what they want to be called, and then you should call them that. I remember some of my lecturers when I was calling them Mr. Robinson, Mr. Dave, Mr. This. They told me, no, call me Dave, call me Linda. You understand? That's what they asked that I called them. It was uncomfortable first, but then I had to start calling them that because that opened the relationship more. It made them more comfortable with me. It made them open up more to me. The family that I was staying with in Canada, I used to call them Mr. and Mrs. first, but then they told me, call us mom and dad. And that's what I started calling them. And then they started opening up themselves to me as parents because I was able to respect their request to call them mom and dad. I remember the guy, my Canadian dad, telling me that he had asked other people to call him dad before, and a lot of them refused. They just stuck to calling him Mr. This, Mr. And he said he really was touched when I just adopted dad. And I said, yeah, because that's what you requested. That was what was going to make you more comfortable. And if I'm going to be living with you, then for us to have more, a more cordial relationship, a vulnerable relationship, then I must respect what makes you comfortable. So think of what the other person is asking you to call them. And then the relationship will begin to evolve to a place whereby you see them as who they truly are to you. And that's why when I call my Canadian parents, I really see them as my parents right now. I call them and I talk to them, mom, dad, and they see me as their son because I see them that way. So sometimes the nomenclature doesn't change. What you call them doesn't change from what they ask you to call them, but then you really begin to see them in that light after a while, and then it flows naturally. And that's true respect. When you're able to call someone how you really see them, that's true respect. That's genuine respect right there. There's a part in the Bible where that kind of touches on this subject matter of respect and how it evolves into what you call someone. There was a part where Jesus was addressing his disciples, and this is repeated in different parts of the gospel, where Jesus was talking to his disciples and he asked them, who do you say I am? Who do people say I am? And people said, oh, people say you are Elijah, you are this prophet, you are this, come back again. And Peter said, and then he asked them, who do you say I am? And Peter said, you are the Messiah. You are the Messiah. And Jesus knew that Peter actually saw him for who he truly was. And so the nomenclature changed between both of them. He saw who Peter was, and Peter saw who he was. And then he started calling, said, Peter, I will begin to call you the rock. So the name changed. What he called Peter changed. What Peter called him changed. The dynamics of the relationship changed at that point, where they saw each other for who they truly were. And that's where there was true respect between both of them. Jesus respected him as a rock, a pillar on which the church will be built. And he, at that point, respected Jesus as the Messiah, the true one that they were expecting to come and save the world. So that's the thing about respect. It's very important that we are able to come to that place where we are able to build relationships, where we call people how we really see them in our heart. And a lot of times, this works best for cordial relationships, not for close relationships. Because if you call people how you see them in your heart in a close relationship, it might be far from flattering. But then what I'm talking about with cordial relationships, to build relationships to a point where we are not guarded, where a guy can tell another guy, "Hey, my love, how you doing?" You understand? It's not a weakness. It's not. It's just that society has taught us to see it as a weakness. But how we can address people, how we really see them in our heart, that vulnerable, that feminine vulnerability is such a beautiful thing. It allows them to have long-lasting relationships, have deep relationship, tight relationships. But that our male guarding doesn't allow us to fully utilize relationships to what they should truly be. And I feel it's very important for us to do this. I realized that, when you have people ask that you call them something before their name. So they say, "I would rather you call me doctor, doctor this. I'd rather you call me engineer this. I'd rather you call me this." It shows that that person is closing up to you rather than opening up to you, especially when it's not in a work environment. It's okay for a doctor to say, "Call me doctor this," if they're consulting for you in a hospital. But when you meet somebody who happens to be a medical doctor, and you strike up a conversation in a cinema or in a shopping mall, and you're talking to them and they're like, "I'd rather you call me doctor," it shows that that person is closing up. When relationships are opening up, what happens is that they become lighter, even in what you call people. So you drop the Mister, drop the Mrs., drop the doctor, drop the engineer. And the better the relationship gets, you drop even alphabets in the name. So you don't call them Tola anymore. You begin to call them T. My wife calls me T. She calls me T. You understand? We're so vulnerable that she has dropped all those other characters in my name and she calls me T. Some people call me Uncle T. Some people call me Mr. T. You understand? The lighter it is, the better. It shows that person is opening up to you. But the more they put up and say, "You have to call me engineer, you have to call me doctor, you have to call me," it's like they're barricading the door and the access to their lives and saying you are not invited in. So everything they decide to call themselves, doctor, professor, is one barricade more in front of that door to their lives. But when people start to onboarding and start to undress themselves by putting up all those, achievements and nomenclature, it means that they're inviting you to come closer and to know them, to know who they truly are. And we must never take that for granted. We must never take that for granted. It's really, really important to call people by what you really feel they are. You understand? How you really see them. Never take it for granted. Sometimes the most romantic things do not sound like the most romantic things. It's funny that even in romance, we've been taught to take nomenclatures as romance. So we just feel like, oh, if we are with someone we are romantically involved with, the person has to be called some, chocolate pudding, sweetheart, and stuff like that. It doesn't have to be. Those things are good if you really feel they're like chocolate pudding to you. But then, calling a romantic one, someone calling your husband daddy, a lot of people see it as old school, as I don't think so. I think let people call you what they see you as. I think it might be the highest compliment to call your husband daddy. I call my wife mommy. You understand? At the point that you're like, I don't like it. It doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound romantic. But then I say, that's how I see you. You understand? I see in you the security I would see in my mother. You are my mother right now. You understand? I feel safe with you. That's how I see you. So it doesn't have to sound traditionally romantic. You understand? So I'm saying this for someone who is in a romantic relationship now and just saying your other half is calling you something that doesn't sound traditionally romantic. Doesn't call you baby. And that's because it doesn't see you as a baby. Do you understand? It might not, it doesn't call you baby, it might call you mom, it might even call you grandmom, you understand? Whatever it is, you need to be open up to what people really see you as. It shows the height of respect, that they feel comfortable to call you what they really see you as, and that you feel comfortable to call them what they what you really see them as. So yeah, I think in a very long roundabout whiny way, that's my answer to your question, Samuel. I feel go that route, those 3 steps, how you've been brought up, what they require that you call them, and hopefully you get to that stage where you are both vulnerable enough to call each other what you see each other as at the end of the day.